Welcome to tonight's event. My name is Susan McLaren, and I am the Creative Director here at Communication Leadership Consultancy at the University of Washington. And on behalf of ComLead, I'd like to welcome you to our student-run speaker series. Our topic tonight is social justice, communication, and movement building. Should be very exciting. It is a lovely, very warm evening here in Seattle, so thank you all for joining us this evening. I have a few announcements before we get started. We are recording tonight's conversation, which I'm sure you saw when you logged on. If you have the bandwidth, we'd love to see your faces, so feel free to turn your camera on, but if possible, please keep your microphone off. We will follow this conversation with an audience Q&A session, so please type your questions into the chat box, and we'll collect them and then pose questions to both Lulu and Marcus for a portion of our time together. And before we get started, we just wanted to share a brief video.
Does the COVID-19 pandemic have you or your organization struggling to connect? The University of Washington's Communication Leadership Program is here to help. We have assembled our COVID-19 consultancy to help nonprofits, small businesses, and on-campus departments. We can help you communicate within your organization and with your audience, pivot communication strategies in the face of COVID-19, create videos and other multimedia assets, and host online events. As community builders and communication professionals with expertise in digital technology, our graduate students and alumni are uniquely equipped for this moment. We're offering pro bono consulting, events, and professional connections. Whether you're a business owner, an employee, or simply looking to improve your communication strategies, we're here to help you. For more information and to schedule a consultation, visit bit.ly/UWCOVIDhelp.
Thank you. And now I would love to introduce Ryan Quicktar, who is our Community Relations and Equity Director, and he will be introducing our esteemed panelists for this evening.
Cool. Thank you, Susan. Good evening, everyone. I'm excited to be here tonight as part of the ComLead consultancy team. We have two amazing panelists who have taken time out of their busy lives in this beautiful Friday evening to share their experiences and knowledge with all of us. So thank you to both of you. First, I'd like to introduce Luzviminda Uzuri Carpenter, most known as Lulu. Lulu works at the intersections of education, media, nonprofit, and community organizing worlds as a queer, chubby, femme, Black, and Filipino woman. She's a 5th through 8th grade performance and media arts teacher at Seattle Girls School, along with the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Coordinator, Affinity Group Leader, and 8th grade advisor. During her extra time, she's a station manager of KVRU 105.7 FM, which focuses on the diverse voices, music, and stories of the South End of Seattle. And she founded the Alphabet Alliance of Color, AOC, in 2017 for queer and trans Black Indigenous people of color. She serves on the Washington State Advisory Committee to the U.S. Civil Rights Commission and has served on multiple boards, including the Teacher Advisory Board at MOPOP, Women Who Rock Organizing Committee, and previously as the chair of the City of Seattle LGBTQ Commission. She believes in the power of art, media, and education and can help prevent violence and promote healing with young adults in all communities. Next up, we have Marcus Green. Marcus Harrison Green is a publisher of the South Seattle Emerald and a columnist with Crosscut. Growing up in South Seattle, he experienced firsthand the neglect of news coverage in the area by local media, which taught him the value of narratives. After an unfulfilling stint working for a Los Angeles-based hedge fund in his 20s, Marcus returned to his community, determined to tell his true story, which led him to found the South Seattle Emerald. He was named one of Seattle's most influential people by Seattle Magazine in 2016. Thank you both again for sharing your time with us. And I'd like to get into our questions now. So in ComLead, we've declared 7 core tenets of what communication leadership should embody. The first is storytelling and embracing the power of it, technology and our ability to adapt to emerging technology. Values, we are principled in how we connect with people. Responsibility, we recognize our power to affect change. Communities, we build, strengthen, and serve them. And advocacy, as we are persuasive. And finally, leadership. We support others through times of transformation. This can also be found on our ComLead website. And so my first question related to those is, can you share with us, what does communication leadership mean to you, and how has that evolved over time?
Are we gonna rock, paper, scissors? Is that the
I was gonna let you go first, Lulu, if you wanted.
era? What does communication leadership mean to me? When I think of communication, my background is art, performance, and media, and my love for radio, specifically hyper local radio, grassroots media. When I think about the values that you just shared, storytelling, values, responsibility, community, advocacy, and leadership, I want to just center media justice. I mean, that's how I came into this work. I personally would have never been a leader in this field if it hadn't been for someone else who was marginalized, who reached out and said, this is what media is. This is what technology is. Come and join me. That someone actually, I went to Hollow Earth Radio specifically, and they put my hands on the dials. They were like, here, go ahead and play. Like, it's nothing to be broken. You can't make a mistake. And as I've moved forward, either teaching in middle school or teaching in community spaces around media and art, it's really interesting about how fearful people are of technology, and based on their identities, thinking that they don't have a right to it, or they don't think that they're smart enough to do it. And the more access we have to creating our own stories, to creating our own images, or being the producers or directors to say, the people who have the talent, this is how I would like my image to be shown. This is how I would like my story to be told. The more power we have in community. It's one of those things where I didn't know where my place was in movement work, but now I know that where my heart is, based on my resume, it looked like my resume, my bio, and what I'm saying right now is my heart is really in empowering others to have access to technology, media, and art to empower their community. And that's what it means to be a leader, is to give access, and then move out of the way so that they can create their own image. Take it away, Marcus.
Hard to follow that one, but no, I mean, I think it comes back to me sort of to paraphrase the Platonic ideal of, Plato said, storytellers rule the world, but I'm not a conqueror, so I'm not trying to conquer anybody. I always say it's storytellers can liberate the world. And I take it back to when I first started in this business. It was, I came back from that stint in LA, when I was leasing Maseratis and living a decadent lifestyle, but was very empty and wanted to find purpose. And storytelling was, especially about the South End, was something that had always given me purpose from a very young age. And I remember doing a story for a small outlet about the Rainier Valley area, which is in South Seattle. And interviewing people on the street kind of thing. And I remember I came across this young man on Rainier Avenue in Henderson. And I asked him, what good can you tell me about the South End and Rainier Valley? What do you love about it? And, he kept telling me nothing, like as much as I kept prodding him. And then finally I was just like, well, why do you say that? And he said, because they say that we're not, because that's what they say about us, that we're nothing, And I remember that he said, after we went back and forth, I remember he just said, I'm a savage, and he kept repeating it. And I kind of just let it go. And I've always remembered that interaction because about 2 weeks later, the young man was found not too far away from where I originally spoke to him, with a bullet in his chest, and he had a gun in his hand. And I've just always thought about, what if there was a different narrative that he had? What if there was a different story? What if, not just about the community, but also about himself? And, who was telling him these stories, right? Where was he getting this information from, right? Who was he, constantly bombarded with nothing in our community at the time, from major news, mainstream outlets, except, crime and urban blight and yada, yada, and this and that. Where was the richness? Where was where was the multidimensionality? Where was the genius of our community? You can't help but have that in a community that at one time held I want to say the three of the top 10 most diverse zip codes, where you had, 80 something different ethnicities, 50 something different ethnicities, 80 something different languages that were spoken, right? I mean, they call it, social scientists call it the edge effect, when people from diverse backgrounds come together to create something that is unique and amazing. And, that uniqueness was always missing from the stories that, for the most part, from the stories that you hear in mainstream media. And so for me, storytelling is everything. It's life. It's the operating system with which we are guided by in life. And so you want to make sure that that operating system is correct.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love the attitude too of liberating the world. I think that that's something that we all look forward to, particularly now in this particular political climate. Marcus, I had a question for you, sort of following up on that a little bit. I mean, I live in South Seattle, and I definitely go to the Emerald to get my news because I want news about my community. This is where I live. These are the people that I see every day. These are the people that I'm talking to. These are my neighbors. And I think that the Emerald has really created a beautiful home for those stories, and you've done a really good job. You highlight local stories. You did the Revolutionary Women series, which was really excellent. You continue to lift up Native voices, which I think is really important. And so one of my questions to you is sort of what challenges did you face when you were founding the Emerald? And I think, you've been doing it 6-ish years now, I guess. So really how has that changed? How has amplifying the voices of the South changed in that time?
It's a good question. I think, when you first start out, just like any startup, it's hard to gain, a foothold and notoriety and relevance. But it was just persistence. When we first started out, I had pretty much sunk all of my savings into the Emerald. I was literally that 30-year-old guy who was living in his mother's basement and had $1 and a dream and not much more. And so a lot of it was just, trying to persevere when you had peers who were, farther along in their careers, especially in the hedge fund world, right? I mean, it was, you went from driving a Maserati to, trying to bum bus fare so that you could get down to, downtown. And so it was, it was hard because at the beginning standpoint, I didn't have a journalism degree. I had a library card and curiosity and a love for storytelling. And so that meant that I had to, so what I did was I hit up every single journalist who I respected in Seattle, and I just asked them to mentor me. And, I cast a wide net, only a few emailed me back, but the ones who emailed me back have, continued to be mentors to this day. And then from there, I had very, very little money to stand out in, but the stories, but, I tried to go to where the darkness was, I said, literally and figuratively, I guess, in terms of where the light wasn't being shown on certain stories. So the only way that you could get certain stories, written in the way and produced in a way that wasn't sort of the, stereotypical fashion of most mainstream media was in the Emerald at the time. Not to pat myself on the back or anything. And then it just so happened that I got lucky, and Pramila Jayapal, who is now, Congresswoman Jayapal and Always On, MSNBC and other places. She was running for a state senator in the 37th district. I asked to interview her. And I remember to this day, she said, "How many people read your paper?" And I said, "Well, if you include me, myself, and my mom, that makes 3 people." And I was like, there's no way she's about to, agree to an interview, but she did. And it ended up that on her campaign literature, even though she knew I couldn't endorse her as the Emerald because we were a 501c3 nonprofit. She still, put her quote from the Emerald on there, and so many more people. And that flyer or mailer went out to, tens of thousands of people. And from there, it just kind of, slowly grew. And so and I'll say, I mean, we still have challenges, obviously, with finances and things like that. You never have as many resources, and you never have as many resources when you try to also stay true to yourself and in your integrity. I mean, we've certainly had folks who have wanted to, who shall remain nameless, who wanted to give us large sums, but it came with strings attached, and and it didn't come with any scissors to sever those ties. And so but at the end of the day, right, I I might not, be sometimes, and it means I have to eat top ramen, on successive nights, but it also means that my soul is mine, and that's
Mhm.
priceless.
So it's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marcus. I think there's a couple things in there that kind of segue into the next question. You talk about how you had a library card versus a degree, and you really made a lot of something, out of nothing, out of your own will. Talking about empowerment, talking about finding what you want to do and passionate about and pursuing that, despite what the current narrative was about the South End of Seattle. And you also sharing the story about the gentleman you met and talked with on Rainier and Henderson, which also has been labeled a certain hotspot for things historically, right? I think this next question is kind of more about social media in this day and age of rapid communication.
Mhm.
In this day and age of social media and rapid communication, what are some good examples of outreach or advocacy that you've seen or have been part of that have had impact? Yeah, that's for
Yeah.
both.
Well, Lulu's probably more tech savvy than I am at this point. But I mean, so I'll just quickly say, I think the connection of just those small micro connections that you see within communities where that, whether it's in Skyway and people are trying to provide food for each other, or it's in Mount Baker where there's like neighborhood gardens where people can go to and connect over. I mean, I think it's just allowing people to know that, hey, you know, I know that you're stuck in your house or you're quarantined or whatever, but we got you. We really do got you. And like, we have you like as a community. And so, I mean, as much as it is quote unquote online, what I've seen is like more and more people are actually connecting offline, right? I mean, they're using that to set the table, the online social media, but in terms of, but they're connecting in a way offline that I don't think that I've seen, at least, recently in my lifetime. And so that's what I'm kind of, to be honest, it's making me somewhat hopeful of what emerges after, COVID-19, that maybe we do have stronger bonds. But I'll let Lulu, take it from here.
And social media, for me, social media could be seen as so many things. Right now, we're developing a curriculum because we are thinking about who you are as a digital citizen and ingraining that into young students right now. And so we're developing a scope and sequence to say, not who are you just right here, but who are you online? And I think it's like cognitively, it's really hard for youth to understand because social media is right there. And it's interesting about how many fights that you need to untangle amongst youth, but adults are no different. So when I think of social media, I think of something that can bring us together or tear us apart. And I'll excuse my you'll see my face and it's like glitching, but you'll hear my voice on my cell phone. It's making me a little bit nervous. I don't want to look at my face because it's like moving all over the screen. But for social media, I think of how it brought me together. Like when I came into movement work and social justice work, specifically around anti-imperialism, ironically, Facebook was making its way out of colleges and being used to forward political campaigns. And so my introduction to social media is very different from youth today, where my introduction was on a political home front and like, what can we use to keep us together? And being from marginalized community, for me, I identify as Black and Filipino, like I can create any group, whether it was in, this is gonna take people way back, right? Friendster, does anybody remember Friendster? Asian Avenue, Black Planet, all those things of like, you got to connect with people that are not in your rural neighborhood or in your urban center. And so it was always a connection where if you didn't have that connection, especially in isolation, especially in the LGBTQ community, you could find that connection. Fast forward to today, and that sense of community online is a little bit more tricky, right? People attack each other. I've seen people like Ijoma Olu, a famous Seattle writer, who has used that in to forward a conversation when some people have attacked her. I've seen it used in regards to slut shaming. I've seen it for political campaigns, Black Lives Matter as a hashtag versus a pound sign. And then when I think about what just happened when the rebellion happened this year, it was social media, and it was like people decoding media and which media outlets should you use, right? So when we talk about social media, we're talking about Telegraph, we're talking about the types of messages that people want to send to each other that are not tracked by the government, understanding all that. So when I'm thinking about advocacy, it's like advocacy for yourself in regards to how you build community online as a kid or as an adult. But then even further is like, how do you further a movement through political, interpersonal relationships, and sending out messages of positivity, or creating like, where are you at? Literally, where is the movement at, street by street, over Telegraph or some decoded message, or tracking Facebook and Instagram to see what the news is not showing you, right? So there's so many different levels that social media hits in our lives right now, and we need to understand who we are on all of those levels and how do we advocate on all of those levels.
Yeah, that really resonates. And I think too, what you're saying, I think that as we age and as we change and as we grow in our use of social media, that our sort of identification with it also changes. That's really interesting. I want to talk to you again, Lulu, because I feel like you come from movement building from this like breadth of experience. You're an educator.
I'm old, that's why. That's okay.
You know, you manage a radio station, you had a radio show for a while, and now you started a nonprofit. So having all of that, not to mention all the other work that you've done, like what strategies do you find most compelling for not only your sort of movement building, but how you build community?
Something that's resonating with what Marcus had said is like, what do you need to shine a light on? What is not seen is kind of like, he said it in a different way, but I was like, it resonated for me. Because when I think about the work that I've done from a young age till now, it was like I was not included, right? My story was not included. So I wanted to be around other people who were on the margins of the margins, and I'm like, what is your story and how do we get our stories told? When I think about what Marcus said also is about the edge effect, that made me think of intersectionality, you know, and intersectionality was a term that was coined by Black women organizers and advocates to say like, me too, like, I'm not just one thing or another. Of course, for me, I'm just gonna preface this by saying like, I do center race in a very specific way and thinking about the intersections, but at the same time, when you think about who's the margin of the margin within your affinity, you need to advocate from that point. So when we think about Black Lives Matter and we think about who is not here with us, who needs their roses now, we need to think about Black trans women, right? And how their story is so invisibilized. And people are sad about one person passing away. Maybe it's not due to police violence, but it's due to state violence, right? We need to reframe the conversation and say who in our communities are disappearing, whose voices needs to be heard, and whose voices need to be heard now before they disappear.
Yeah, I would second that about not just trans women, but also maybe the disabled community. I feel like that's another community that we also we don't feel that I see that as often as I should.
Yeah.
And really making sure that they're centered.
Yeah, definitely. I'm like, when you break down the socioeconomic and the access to healthcare to those people that were, those in our community that have been shot, you'll see that disability justice is key. But there's racial understanding of like, when people are able to see someone with compassion that has a disability versus somebody who's like, their disability is erased because of the color of their skin, right? People don't see some of the people that were shot with compassion and that maybe they had a mental health disorder. What they saw was a Black person that was scary when they were actually the person that needed to be protected. yeah, but in regards to my stories, I'm like, I really want, like, for me, I just always want to shine a light on who's not present, whose story's not shown, but also, like, I'm really happy. I know people are like, you have 3 jobs, Lulu, what are you doing? But I'm like, I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life, because I feel like I can be honest, I can stand with integrity, and I've been in so many different positions, and I know people in this Zoom call possibly are in a position right now where they can't, for their safety, voice their concerns due to hierarchical structures. And I feel like right now I am really at a place where at Seattle Girls School, KVRU, and with AAOC that I feel empowered, and I want to share that power with others.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. This next question is for both of you, and I think it speaks to what both of you also said, is the work that what has led you to do the work that you're doing is being left out, is not having your story told, or not seeing your story, or those like you having their story shared. So this is more of a historical context and leading up to now, where we are with the Black Lives Matter movement, and specifically, as you call, Lulu, the rebellion, which I completely agree with. So in terms of like your organizations and multiple, how have you all pivoted in your roles, if at all, and with the ongoing issues of systemic racism, and in response to the Black Lives Matter movement? This has worked, in my opinion, for both of you all that you've been doing. And so I'm just curious if you could share about how, if at all, it's been amplified, your work has been amplified or shifted.
Yeah. Oh, okay. You want me to go to the, okay. All right. Yeah, I mean, I think as you alluded to, Ryan, I mean, kind of from the inception of the Emerald, it was about covering, things like structural racism and patriarchy and hetero, normativity and all those other things. And I think for us, it's just we've just been given, granted more awareness in this time period. I can't tell you how many emails I get every day, where people are asking, it's from white people asking, well, how do I be a better ally? How do I be a better co-conspirator? What can I do? And it's like, man, I'm not, I'm not the magical whatever to grant you these things. But, so for us, it's just been trying to continue to do the work and do more of it. And to just be there when the community asks. And it's been harder to do sometimes because like everything moves at the speed of chaos. And so you got to do a lot more triage, to be honest with you, in terms of, okay, what is important, what is urgent, what needs to be told, what is, going to be handled elsewhere. And, what stories, again, it's always about what stories aren't getting told and why aren't they getting told. And for us, it's just, making sure that we remember to continue, even though things are moving so quickly, it's to remember that to continue to humanize people, right? And to bring empathy to people. It's even, even as something as small as, well, I shouldn't say it's small, but, there's a lot of other organizations that they will call people who have, are returning to society from incarceration, they'll call them ex-felons, right? But the reason a lot of times people continue to use that phrase is because it's to dehumanize people who have been incarcerated, and so that makes it harder to create sympathy and empathy for those folks. And so it's trying to make sure that you're constantly humanizing folks in your coverage. Even if it's 3 a.m. and you're groggy and you need to write this piece because it needs to get out. It's just making sure that you hold yourself to the standards that you claim that you espouse. And it isn't always easy per se, because you are a human being, but at the very least you try to continue to aim for it every day. And as I say, you usually hit, or at least graze, what you aim at.
Can you repeat what you said? You said things move at the speed of chaos. Is that what you said, Mark?
I did, yeah. So I didn't know. I might need to overpronunciate. I'm my bad. I'm a little parched. No. I'm a little parched.
Oh no, I just wanted to.
I didn't offer no water on his panel, so.
Yeah, I'm learning a lot, so I'm going to. They didn't offer no water. Where's my Grubhub? No, okay. Okay. The reason why I wanted you to repeat it, I wanted to make sure so I could claim it and write a book. I was joking. Appropriate. No, I'm joking. So I don't. Things that you're saying are really resonating for me. When I was thinking of the speed of chaos, I could feel the chaos coming on, but at the same time, in the last few years, I've been coming into an understanding of my personal disabilities and my internalized ableism. And one of the things is like this idea of slowing down, right? And it's so hard as an organizer. There's trauma happening all over the place. One thing I didn't mention is that when I came to Seattle, I started in the sexual assault, domestic violence, and human trafficking field. It was a lot of intervention work. I moved from working with youth and young adults, working at places like Orion Center. I moved into domestic trafficking, and I was so traumatized. The one thing that saved me was like learning about art. Art was that gateway to learning about media. It's like I took the long, windy road to get to where I am right now. But we were talking about secondary trauma, and they were like, what do you do in order to heal yourself from all this trauma? This is before all the self-care guru woo-woo stuff came out. This was like literally people on the front lines were like dropping like flies. 3 years was your term. And then you're like, I'm gonna go and be a bartender or a waitress or walk some dogs. That's what happened to some of my friends. And I was like, I'm burnt out. And I ended up working at Washington Hall to slow down. And art was my salvation. I started creating shows, doing hip hop shows for marginalized communities. And I learned that there's different moments, this moment too, where I needed to slow down. And I realized like, you know what? I actually don't need to be at the front anywhere. What I need to do and what I need to pivot and do in my age is how do I give access to youth and how do I learn to follow their leadership humbly and non-defensively because they're angry, right?
Right.
And this moment, like I'm angry too, but for some reason I'm like the person that I am right now, instead of anger, I'm like, it hurts me so much. I'm not a nonviolent person in the sense of, a specific type of practice or pacifist in any way, shape, or form. But anger is something that I wanted to move away from. And so when this rebellion came on, I was just like, I need to slow down while everybody's speeding up, towards chaos. And I need to listen well. And I need to know, because I can't be out there on the streets, what can I do for my house? How can I, and have people not feel guilty about that either? Like everybody has their place in a movement. I need to slow down personally. And I need to give access to youth, and I need to learn how to follow their leadership. And so there's something I did not agree with, but I went with it. I was just like, what is this learning moment? What do I need to do to learn and just like trust that whatever happens is going to happen? What do I need to do to not judge the folks that are choosing to put their bodies on the line and are able-bodied enough to do that? When I think about KVRU, it's once again the same thing of like, everybody's scattered. We're a volunteer organization. So I'm like, what do I need to slow down to build my organization up? Because this is just one moment. This is not the end of the revolution. The revolution started over 400 years ago, way past that. And I'm just one moment. So like, I need to think 400 years down the line of like, I'm a little pebble in this huge river that's a movement, and do my part and do my role, And the role that I have right now, I feel it's about building infrastructure. So what I did for all of my organizations is build infrastructure. What I did not do was chase COVID-19 money for direct services. I'm like, I'm not in the direct service role no more. How can I pass grants on to other people that need that money? But when the second phase of funding came out, I was just like, how can I dream bigger than a direct service? Because I don't want to do that. I'm like, I'm burnt out off of that. People do that better than me. I don't have that skill set, so let me not get that money. But what infrastructure can I build for us to dream bigger and to dream beyond this moment? Because when we think of COVID-19, when we think of a Black rebellion, those are things that are built off of a foundation of years past. And the reason why youth are responding faster is because they have that momentum, now. And I'm so proud of, like, I'm more fearful than youth are, and I'm like, thanks for being fearless for me. And how do I follow you? And what is my role in this movement? How can I shift and change?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that spot on. I completely agree with that. And that's just even from coming today. I sat in on a panel where Youth in Skyway proposed different land use legislation to elected officials, and it was empowering to hear them. It's like, yep, they have the answers. They're completely right. They put their time in. How can we support? I have a follow-up for both of you, just building off of what you were just sharing, Lulu. What came out for me from what you shared was the theme of sustainability. And, you touched on self-care, and Marcus too. I think what I hear from both of you is like pursuing this, your passion with writing and sharing stories and following what you really love and want to do and put out in the world. Compared or also at the exact same time, a lot of folks call it two pandemics, with COVID-19 and then also racism, which has been around. What does that look like for you in terms of sustainability? I like that word a little bit more. I think self-care is part of sustainability. But if you could talk a little bit about what that looks like for you and how you've approached that, or even shared content from your positions to help promote that.
Yeah, I think for me, in the personal aspect of it, it's I recently heard somebody say that when we are that when you're driving around in your car, right, and the check engine light comes on, we would call it foolish if somebody continued to drive around in a car with the check engine light on for weeks and months. But when it comes to our personal lives and when we equate that to ourselves, we call that Tuesday, right? Because we're just always so busy and always so hectic. And for me, I just realized that, sometimes stillness can be the key in terms of being still for a bit so that you can actually absorb the things that are, that are going on and process the things that are going on. And I'll say this in terms of the organization-wise, I think trying to collaborate with as many organizations as possible, knowing that, whether it's KBRU Radio, Converge Media, what have you, we all sort of have our different roles and lanes, and not one of us, because we don't have the resources to, not one of us can do it alone. And so being able to sort of move away from that model that used to exist when, especially when I was growing up, and when it came to Black media or POC-based media, a lot of it would be very competitive in nature. And I think now you have people who have moved to the idea that, for us to survive, we're going to have to collaborate. I mean, that just has to be the strategy. And that literally, if we all do, we can all do well together. It's no more of this sort of fighting for crumbs kind of mentality. It's like, now let's play a different game. You know what I mean? And so I'll say in terms of sustainability, it's one of those things where it's going to have to be, I view that as a collective thing, right? I want, Lulu and KBRU to be successful. I want Amari Salisbury and Converge to be successful. I, of course, want the Emerald to be successful, so that we can shine together as a constellation, right? Because a constellation outshines one star every time. And so.
Like giving a high five. I was like, let me put on my little background. My little, I'll show you the constellation. Take your little Afrofuturism into the room.
There you go.
It's interesting of like when you said like to be successful is like as KVRU is a low power FM, and so if people have followed the low power FM movement, they will see that low power FM folks have always gathered to sustain themselves and share resources. There's on Facebook, there's this thing called LPFM Solidarity. There's folks like Sabrina Roach that have done connectivity activities and events before LPFMs ever lifted off the ground, I started working in grassroots radio with Hollow Earth Radio. It was not a career at all. It's really a passion. And I still support that radio, even though it's smaller. But also like thinking about how you can highlight each radio station and create a bigger universe. When I came to KVRU, I was handed a list also of like community partners, like you need to connect with all these different hyper local newspapers because they are important too. We need to collaborate with them in some way. And beyond that community partnership is like, how can you support like grassroots organizing, whether you call it that or community-based organizations, or you call it small nonprofits with 1.5 staff. How can you collaborate so that you don't have to lift everything by yourself? So I totally agree with what Marcus was saying. And I'm gonna add on is that people should invest in people, right? Because when all of your money is gone, you will have those diehard folks that are like, I don't know what you're doing. You're new leadership. I'm here, ride or die. I believe in, like invest in their education of like, it's beyond the radio. It's about media justice. It's about news deserts in the South End, that it's by saying like, we're advocating for this radio, we're advocating for this newspaper because we're worth it. We deserve to have our own stories. And like, there'll be moments where there'll be, we'll pivot and we'll like be in a low valley, but you know what? We'll climb, the next mountain together. When I think about sustainability, I also think about a quote that says, building at the speed of trust, and that we need to invest in, not in projects, like at the end of a project, if the people are torn apart, then what's the point of the project? Because it was supposed to be a community building effort. So are you taking care of yourself and relationships along the way? Are you pushing people out of the way or stepping on their toes for you to reach their goal? Or can you check in with them? Can there be accountability processes along the way? Can you talk differently to people? I mean, there's a generational gap in regards to how people organize and see each other. And a lot of this thinking also comes from disability justice, as we were talking about earlier, that we need to slow down, that we need to move at the speed of trust, that we need to build less transactional relationships where I can take something from you versus that we're building something together and I'm going to build you up and you're going to build me up.
Yeah, I think that's really, I think lifting up other people as you move up is just something that our culture doesn't do enough of. And so I second that. I was wondering too, just before we move into sort of more audience questions, because you're both in the communication field and a lot of us here are in communications, what is some of the best advice you've ever gotten? Not only, it doesn't have to be around communications, but just in general.
My best advice is from you. No kidding. My consultation. No kidding. Marcus, it's your turn. I'm gonna go get some water. I'll be back.
Okay. Best advice is from my mother, and she said that Marcus, it's not your fault that you're born into a world that is unfair and unjust and cruel and horrible at times, but it is your fault if you leave it that way when you go. And for me, that's just always put sort of the onus to try to do everything you possibly could within your power to improve your community, to improve yourself, and to try to improve this world. Right? It's one of those things where maybe not one individual obviously can make a wave big enough to sort of turn the tide around, but an individual can create ripples with other individuals, and it's no singular act that does it, but it's a confluence of those things. And to be able to just, as I think Walt Whitman said, just to be able to contribute a verse to that song, the song of humanity, is an experience of a lifetime. So.
Thank you for sharing that. That's very powerful. I think the best advice someone gave me And thank God for you. You have a great mom. I want to meet your mom someday, Mark.
When all this is over, we'll
I
connect.
like her already since I met you. The best advice was, I'm going to say the same thing. I was on The Cut the other day. It was like Keeping It 100 or something that's coming out soon. And I said the best advice that sticks with me when I wake up in the morning is, I was having a really, really hard time because I felt like people weren't listening to me. And my friend was like, Lulu, there will come a time when you will be steady, right? That if people underpraise you and do not see your work and do not see your value, you will still see your value. And there will come a time when people will overpraise you and give you too much praise. And you'll get a big head, but can you stay steady to the course? And it's not about how people are praising you, but you know that you're doing things well, because there will come a time when there will be many critiques or people will throw you under the bus. And so consistently, I try to stay steady forward, because I think in the communication field, you can get hungry, not hungry, you will thirst after your own image. And there'll be a time when you get, and this is the kids too, right? You'll get 300 something likes, and the next day you'll get 2. And studies have shown that you have a lot of, like, that impacts you. You think that it doesn't. But I think in the communication field, when you get into radio, when you get onto the news and people start praising you and your work, and they're grabbing at you thinking like, oh, this person can do something for me, either through their image or through their status, like consistently remain steady the course, because there will come a time when they'll underpraise you and not see your work, and there'll be a time that they overpraise you. But be consistent with the people that see your work, value you, know your labor, can give you valid critique to your face, regardless of how many likes you have behind your name. That's totally important. This one really side note to this is, like, I do some social experiments on social media. As a femme person, I like putting on lots of makeup, sometimes, and sometimes not. Sometimes I'll just dress up, look nice, get on my camera, take a photo, and see how many likes I'll get. Because, like, nobody will like the sad stuff. So I strategically use my social media. I'm like, okay, I'll put this little photo up, so it distracts people for a while. And it's fine. It's resilience practice, Black joy, all these different things that you want to see. You want to see positive images of people of color and Black folks. And at the same time, like, can we also stare at the face of tragedy and balance that out on our social media? So same thing is just like, stay steady the course on your social media as well as in your real life.
Yeah, that's hard. That's real hard. Well, one more question, and then I'll throw it out there too. So if everybody else has questions, please start typing them now into the chat box. We would love to hear from you. In the meantime, I wanted to ask specifically, Lulu, about AAOC and the work that you're doing there. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about that. We sort of alluded to a few things that you're doing, but I really want to shine some light on that. So if you could talk a little bit about the organization that you've started.
So Alphabet Alliance of Color was started in 2017. At my middle school, kids are brilliant. They said there were too many letters in the LGBTQ world. So they called it the alphabet. So it's like all the letters, right? And so it was a holding place for some queer, trans, Black, Indigenous people of color that we were organizing. And it's interesting when you think about communication, literally the idea of moving at the speed of trust came from us having conversations that we move slow. And literally, we feel like we're successful because we're communicating with each other across our networks in a place once a month. There's over 15 organizations that meet every single month that are led by QT BIPOC folks, so that we're not torn in any different direction. So oftentimes, we're tokenized within white LGBTQ organizations, or we're tokenized or left behind in Black and people of color organizations over here. So we were like, you know what? The truth is we want to be grounded in POC communities. So we want to not give up our culture and our home base. We don't want to experience racism in LGBTQ organizations, and we want to actually lead the movement because we're actually the ones doing the work, jumping from community to community, you know? So, and we're doing like double, triple the work of a lot of people because we want to build that bridge, that the bridge of like that space that has been created by society that says we're not whole and wants to keep all of our identities separate within us. We're like, we're going to bridge that. We're whole. We deserve to center ourselves. Even we're not going to be on the margins anymore. And we started creating policies and other things. So right now we have a couple of projects. We're just wrapping up our pipeline project, which is a leadership project for QT BIPOC folks. It's a 6-week course. We're going to assess it, and then it's going to go on for 2 more years, and then we're hoping to continue to build that out. It's also a storytelling research project that we created in 2019. We're wrapping that up, and so you'll see a report on the work that we did and the themes that we saw with our interviews and storytelling project. What else? Oh, we're doing COVID-19 safety project. So when you think about the HIV and AIDS movement and what's happening with COVID-19 in regards to a pandemic, it's like this is not new for some communities. People have been terrorized by the medical industrial complex in many ways and by disease and not served. And so how do we take that knowledge and dream forward and think about what does it mean for our communities to be safe? Because we keep each other safe when there's no institutions around. We kept each other safe through surgeries. We've kept each other safe through queer bashings. We kept each other safe for all these years, and we deserve to center ourselves and keep each other safe. So that's what we're doing, creating a safety project. I'll give you more information so you can pass it on to everybody after we get our kit together. There'll be a toolkit after, of course.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Well, Marcus, I had one more question for you, which is I know that you are specifically highlighting Native voices now in the Seattle Emerald once a month, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we have a column that specifically does a monthly column that specifically does highlight Native voices from our community. We are looking to hopefully do that once a week as opposed to once a month, and then as well as get some more folks on board as actually permanent full-time writers and reporters for us. Unfortunately, I'm not technically a permanent full-time, at least in pay. So we need to get myself on at first as an official full-time employee. But rest assured that we're doing our best to get as many people on board who aren't typically typically don't have the same amount of voice or platform in mainstream media, quote unquote.
Awesome. Ryan, do you have any other follow-up questions?
No. There's a lot we could ask. There's 6 minutes, and I want to be conscious of time. I don't have any questions for it right now. I know where to find Marcus. I can definitely find where to find Lulu. So.
I don't know you know money, do I, Ryan?
You don't know where I am.
Okay.
I'm just in the
No.
All right, I got one more. Who do you follow? Like, what media do you follow? Who do you enjoy? Who are you listening to, watching, reading?
Oh, wow. Well, Lulu, obviously,
I'm not doing it. I'm not writing anything right now. No kidding.
I got her. Lulu's Instagram is just dope. It's entertaining. It's wisdom there. No, besides Lulu, I read a lot of because I have to stay up to date on the news. Like my sort of reading for fun is more history and sort of the timeless reading, if you will. So everyone from Audre Lorde to James Baldwin to Richard Wright. I read a lot of sort of stoic, contemplative stuff, such as just got done with a book called Stillness is the Key, and The Ego is the Enemy. Sort of about, sort of equipping yourself, if you will, to handle adversity in the world. There's in terms of and I can't tell you the last movie that I saw. I just have not had time, so I'm sorry. I'm not a if you're looking for pop culture, suggestions, I'm just not the person.
Nope, I'm not. What's clear to you? So thank you for that. What about you, Lulu?
I'll be honest. I'm reading some trashy fan fiction right now. It's good for the soul, to avoid life. But I'm also reading. I'm stuck on Adrienne Maree Brown. I met her a long time ago at Allied Media Conference. If you can ever go to that conference, I promote it all the time. Go to that conference in Detroit. She has a new book called Pleasure Activism, which is brilliant. It talks about how we deny ourselves pleasure, but it's just pleasure in all of its holistic ways. She also has a book called Emergent Strategies, and I just keep on looking at it and rereading it for references, because oftentimes we can take our cues from nature in regards to how we should behave and act as humans when we think about all of our relations in nature, as our indigenous brothers and sisters and cousins talk about. In that book specifically, it talks about how we sometimes we try to go we try to be in these institutions that are white, patriarchal, normative, heteronormative institutions, but the truth of who we are is not in these institutions. And so we should move a little bit differently. And that's what the book talks about. In regards to pop culture, I've been watching Sister Nun. I think people should watch that because people don't know the long, deep history of feminism and radicalness in the nunnery. Read about it. It's like Catholic nuns are no joke. And it's so funny that they have this, I don't really like the white main character, but all the other ones are women of color that shoot guns and roll around on the ground and, topple the patriarchy. So that's pretty fun. And that's what they've been doing for a long time. Back in the day, you could only own land if you were a nun. So I think that I would have been a nun back historically. That's a good question. Back in the day. Yeah. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. We have a few announcements here at the end that I will get to here in a minute when I scroll down to them. First of all, thanks to all the members of the ComLead Consultancy, Stacy Stewart, my co-host Ryan Quigtar, thank you very much, Hannah Wheeler, and especially Evelyn Kuo for her excellent work putting these together. Also thanks to Mo Herbert for her tech support tonight and just for general help facilitating our events. Alex Stonehill, thank you for your leadership. He helps us out with the COVID consultancy from the ComLead Head of Creative Strategy, and we want to send out a huge congratulations to Aken Yasin, who is our new director of the program. We're thrilled to have you, and thank you, Hanson, for all of your work on our program. We will be sending out a short video capture of this video tonight. Well, not tonight. It's probably not going to be tonight. It's probably going to be later in a few days, but you can rewatch it and energize all of these gems that have been shared with us tonight. Thank you so much for those. And also a brief survey just about your experience and what you would like to see in the future. And again, if this kind of conversation appeals to you, you can always join our program because it's really great. We've put a little link there on the side. If you would like to consult with us, we are also available for pro bono consulting, so please hit us up again. The link to the form is also in the chat. And if you would like to volunteer with us and to work with organizations like, for example, KBRU or any other organization featured here this evening, we can also work with you on that. One just short note that we would like to add is that we will be taking a short pause in September, the consultancy, so that we can get ready for the coming semester. And we're going to launch a new website. We're going to launch some new features. So be on the lookout for all of that. With that said, thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. And we hope you enjoyed the conversation this evening. Hit us up with email if you have any additional questions. And with that, thank you. Please take care of one another. Be kind to one another. Thank you for joining us. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you next Friday when we have content strategy, a case study and skill building conversation, which should be also really good. But thank you again, Marcus and Lulu. We really appreciate it.